Hello everyone. This is a tape made as part of the international arts that we did for VSA Arts, and it is part of the 40th celebration of the existence of VSA. I happen to be fortunate to go to various places in the world to perform. And I will start with going to Cambodia. That was a part of a trip that we have just done this year in January and February. And I went to Cambodia to Siem Reap, where there is an enormous temple called Angkor Wat. And there, people go very, very early in the morning. Travelers, all kinds of people meet there, and of course this is the time for the Buddhist prayers, and the sun rises on the backside of the temple, and here is this amazing 1,000-year-old temple, more than 1,000, against the rising sun. My husband went closer to take photographs, and at this point I was just sitting there, and it's somewhat desert-like, little sandy, and I was sitting there with my translator, and all of a sudden behind me I hear little tables being unfolded and being set up, and very soon I smelled coffee. And my translator explained that these people, the Cambodians, come there early in the morning to sell their coffee. And it was indeed wonderful because he bought me a cup, but no sooner was I starting to drink my wonderful, strong, life-giving cup of coffee when I was surrounded by children. These children do not go to school in the mornings. They go in the afternoons so that they could share a building. In the mornings, the older children go till 1 o'clock, and then the later children, younger children, go from 2 to 5 in the afternoon. However, these children were actually little beggar children. They came there to pick on me, to buy little scarves, little postcards. But very soon, I started to tell them stories. And very soon, they were just amazed and standing around, and we all started singing together, which was amazing to me. We sang Frère Jacques. They knew it in Cambodian. I knew it in French, and we were singing away. And they understood. My translator was sitting next to me, and so all of a sudden, my husband always said, Estelle is a kid magnet, because before I knew what was going on, I was telling stories in Cambodia. This was totally unplanned. But we did take pictures and videos so that we could share how far VSA performances went at this time. These children are very well behaved. Although our little beggar children, although they mostly live on the streets, they are so kind and sweet. And the story that I found fascinating was they were bugging me to buy stuff, and I said, no, let's sing some more. And then they said, oh yes, story. Then they want to hear more stories. So of course I traded stories with them while they wanted to sell me postcards. But there was a little cat, and I picked the cat up and I said, why don't you sell postcards to the cat? And they go, oh no, that cat belongs to the monks, and that cat doesn't have money, just like the monks. They don't have money either, which is really true. The monks get up very early every morning, and they get on a truck, they load them up body to body on a truck, and then they go through Siem Reap with little bowls, and they knock on doors, and they And the Cambodians know, or the Siem Reapers know, that the monks are coming. So they get up 4 o'clock in the morning, the inhabitants of the homes, and they cook for the monks. So when the monks come and knock on the doors, there is the food, and they put it in the bowls. And the children there also go very early into the monkhood, and they then go for like maybe a month to learn the Buddhist traditions. But they too, we saw little bitty monks, they too are actually begging with their little bowl for food. After Siem Reap, we flew into Rangoon. That is the old Burma's capital city. And today they call it Myanmar, but the English, I believe, call it Burma, and some people even still do call it Burma. And the plan was, there I was going to perform at a school. But, you know, after a train and a bus and a car, I finally landed on Inle Lake. And I stayed in a house on Inle Lake, and every morning, early, we would get in what they call a long-tail boat. And this boat is so narrow, there's only one person at a time can sit inside of this boat. And so first it will be our friend Harris, and then Carlene, and then me, and then David, and then our translator, and then our boatsman. So it's a narrow boat, and we would slide through the waters of Inle Lake, and then all along the banks of the rivers, you would hear people waking up, and you will hear the cocks crowing, and you will hear the monks praying. And it was just such a surreal moment, because this is very tropical. So early in the morning, it's very foggy and misty. So you go through those silent mists, and you just hear these sounds. And we landed at this little village where I now will be telling stories to children at a little school. And we anchored our boat and we started walking. No electricity, very, very little infrastructure. No television, because, just to remind you, Burma has been closed to the rest of the world for almost 50 years. So it has just reopened for visitors 2010. And we wanted to go before it might close again after a big election, which might take place this year. So everything is still very natural. Everybody has their own little vegetable garden, and they have their little pigs, and they have their little chickens, and they mostly live on stilts. Because during the monsoon season, the lake rises at least 20 feet. And then they have to be above the water. So everyone also has their little long-tail boat. But this time we were just there before the monsoon season, and we walked along these trails among these houses, standing on stilts. And I said to myself, I thought, my goodness, there is nothing Western here that the children can relate to. And furthermore, I have to tell the stories through my translator, who then translates it into Burmese, or a dialect of Burmese, because there are 135 different dialects in Myanmar. So we walked along, and we walked by, and I hear them making rice cakes, and they make sesame seed cakes and little pancakes that they hang like washing over some palm fronds. And then when those are dry, they eat it like what we would think of a potato chip. But so everywhere people were putting the rice cakes out to dry, and the pancakes hanging on the palm fronds. And I'm beginning to see this is so far from what we as Westerners are used to. And I started making my story, and I started, and as we went by the pigs and the chickens, and of course the monks are there, and Buddha is everywhere. And so when I got to the schoolhouse, it was basically a structure that had no walls, and the roof was held up by bamboo, very thick bamboo poles, and then the roof was also a woven bamboo. And the children sit on little bamboo mats, and they were 3 to 6 years old, and they were so quiet. The people are very, very quiet there. You would never hear them yell across the street at each other. You will never hear people yelling and screaming. They are very composed, I would think of a word to call them. So here were these children sitting, and my husband said their eyes were really big, and they were just looking at me, and my translator's name was Zozo. And I do want to remind you that most of the men there wear a long skirt, which is called a lungi. So my translator is in his long skirt, and some of the little boys are in long skirts. And the girls wear on their faces something that is called tanaka. And I also got tanaka to put on my face, but it is ground up tree bark. They believe it's good for the skin, and they believe that it cools them. Don't forget, it's very, very hot there. And so this tanaka, they put it on their cheeks, a bit down here on the nose and on the chin. And most ladies wore that on their faces. And like I say, the girls at the school, the little girls had the tanaka on their faces. And it's brownish and dark brown, they told me, when it is still wet. And then when it dries on your face, it is sort of a light sandy color. And so I started my story, and the children were so inhibited. They couldn't participate, because I agreed that this will be a participation story, or stories. And I started, and I said, once upon a time, there was a woman who loved to make rice cakes. And then I showed them, and then we sing, rice cakes, rice cakes. Well, they took forever to do that. And my translator was as animated as he possibly could be, and he was like, rice cakes, but of course in Burmese. And finally, then I said, it's a woman who loved to make rice cakes, and then one day she lost the rice cake, and she ran down the road, and she came to a chicken, and she asked the chicken, have you seen my rice cake? And then the chicken was going, quack, 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 quack. And I did that. Now the children has to all do that, and they couldn't, quack, 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 quack. And they were just staring at me. And so finally, from the chicken, the women ran to the pig, and of course then I went oink, oink, and they couldn't do it. They could not make those sounds. And finally, here and there was a child who could do it. But I'm still amazed that they never, ever could participate. They are and the teacher was such a neat lady and full of smiles. My husband said just the whole face is just teeth. And she is also in the tanaka on her face. And she was trying to get the children to participate, and they just were so, I think, inhibited, or their background, and I don't want to say their religion, but it could be the religion. They are very peaceful and very quiet. So I told, but the fun part was Danielle was coming, and they did some songs for me. And we did take that on a video as well, and I believe that will be part of the 40-day celebration video, where they sing, hello, hello, how are are you? And then they shake hands, and they could do that very well. They love to shake hands. So I shook hands for I don't know how many children, because that's the one thing they were not afraid or inhibited to do. So that was the children at this little village, and honestly, I know I should know the name, and even if I knew the name, I could not say it. And it is way, way far away from any kind of civilization as we know it today. That was Myanmar, here where they make paper, everything out of paper, everything out of lotus blossoms, everything out of lotus stems. They weave it like silk. And that is how they live there. And that is what you will see, a little child just doing a little weaving, or a little child making, after they make the sesame seed pancake, you see just a little child having a little pancake, and he would put it on the sand, and then he would scrape some hot coals over that pancake. Tiny little child, and you feel like, oh, he's gonna burn. But no, that's how he cooks his pancake. Then he scrapes it off, and evidently the consistency of the pancake doesn't hold the ashes, so they can eat it just fine. That is my backstory of the village in Myanmar, and it was on Inle Lake. And now I'll skip backwards to 2014 when I was in South Africa, and that is where we did, I perform in my language, and I did, or rather I told stories in Afrikaans, my language, and I did this for a number of senior centers in Johannesburg, Pretoria, and Pretoria. And the best part of that was that I could actually use my own language, but then I also used, I did the piece that I wrote on the life of Annie Sullivan, Vibrations of Laughter, how she taught Helen to feel the vibrations in her body so she could teach Helen Keller, of course, to laugh. And the other project that we had going on was a project in Nepal, Kathmandu. My husband and my brother, who happens to be blind, went to climb to the base camp of Everest in the Himalayas, and I sent cameras to Kathmandu, to an orphanage there. And we exchanged that with children in Tennessee, who also took pictures. And so the children of Kathmandu did these beautiful photographs of the mountains and showing their culture, and the children of Tennessee traded with photographs that they sent then to show their culture in the world. So I believe that I trust that is something of interest, where in the world and how different the world is as we know it in the US. Thank you very much.